You should use them to protect yourselves. In Yggdrasil, most items could be customized by inlaying them with data crystals. However, there were also artifacts. These artifacts were dropped as fixed data and couldn't be augmented. These horns were a lower-tier example of those artifacts. Momonga had used one once. It had summoned about 12 fairly strong goblins, 2 goblin archers, a goblin mage, a goblin cleric, 2 goblin riders with wolves, and a goblin leader. For an army, it was pretty small and weak. To Momonga, these items were junk. He was surprised he hadn't gotten rid of them. This had to be the best use for them. And yet, there was one good thing about the goblin general's horns. The goblins it summoned didn't disappear after a set time. They stuck around until they died. They would be able to buy the girls some time. Having given his brief explanation, Momonga set off. He referred to the image of the entire village still in his mind. Albedo accompanied him. However, before they had taken more than a few steps, a voice called out to them. Thank you for saving us. Thank you." Hearing their voices express their appreciation, Momonga stopped. He turned to look at the 2 teary-eyed girls and replied curtly, "Don't worry about it. And I know it's shameless of me, but we don't have anyone to rely on but you. Please, please save our mom and dad, got it? If they're alive, I'll save them," he promised casually. The older sister's eyes widened. She seemed stunned, as if she shouldn't believe he'd just said that. Then she returned to herself and bowed. Thank you so much. And may I ask," she swallowed hard, "your name?" When he went to give his name, Momonga wouldn't come out. Momonga was the name of the guild master of Aints Ul Gown. What am I now? What is the name of the last player remaining in the great tomb of Nazarick? Oh, I see. You would do well to remember my name. I'm Aints Ul Gown. Yarug. The howl set the air vibrating. It was the signal that one slaughter would give way to another. The hunters would be the prey. Lons Digramp cursed his god for the umpteenth time. In the past 10 seconds, he'd probably cursed him enough for a lifetime. If God really exists, he should get down here right now and smite this evil being. Why was Lons, a pious believer, being forsaken? There is no God. He had always made fun of the unbelievers who spouted such nonsense, asking them where the magic the priests used came from. But now, he was beginning to be convinced that he'd been the foolish one all along. The monster before him, if he had to give it a name, he'd call it a Death Knight. Advanced a step, looking pleased. Lons backed up 2 steps instinctively to put more space between them. His armor was rattling as he trembled. The tip of his sword wavered in the air. It wasn't just him. All the swords of the 18 men surrounding the Death Knight were shaking. Their bodies were ruled by fear, but no one fled. It wasn't out of bravery. The chattering of their teeth proved that if they could, they'd forget everything and run away as fast as they could. They simply knew it was impossible. Lons shifted his line of sight slightly, seeking salvation. They were in the center of the village. 60 villagers they'd rounded up were watching them, terrified, from around the square. The children were hidden behind the slightly raised wooden platform used for events. Several people carried clubs, but they weren't ready to fight. They could only manage to hold onto their weapons. When Lons and the other knights attacked the village, they had come from all 4 directions and driven the villagers into the center of town. Then, after searching the empty houses and carefully checking for hidden hideouts, they had planned to douse them in alchemical oil and burn them down. There were 4 knights still on their horses stationed in the area. They were on watch with their bows at the ready. They could kill anyone who tried to flee the village. This was a plan they'd used many times. It had no weaknesses. The killing was taking a bit longer than expected, but it had been progressing smoothly. They had gathered the remaining living villagers in one area. After some moderate culling, they would release a handful. At least, that's how it was supposed to have gone. Lons remembered the moment things took a turn. Ilian had tried to slash at some straggling villagers from behind. They were running to the square and he got sent flying into the air. It was so absurd no one could understand it. His armor may have been made lighter with magic, but it was still heavy. He was a grown-built man who could make sense of the sight of him arcing lightly through the air like a ball. He flew more than 20 feet before crashing to the ground. The crash made a hideous noise, and then he didn't so much as twitch. Even harder to believe was the site where Ilian had been moments before. The horrifying undead Death Knight slowly lowered the huge shield it had used to bash him out of the way. That was the beginning of their despair. Yeog, a high-pitched shriek sounded, as if all hell had broken loose. One of his comrades in the circle, no longer able to bear the fear, turned tail and ran. In a situation like this, with such a delicate balance, one weak link could break the entire group. But no one followed him. They had a very good reason not to. A black blur whipped through Lonz's peripheral vision. For having such a giant build, far surpassing the height of an average human, the Death Knight was certainly quick on his feet. His comrade was permitted to run 3 steps. As he went to take his fourth, a silver flash cut his body in 2. It was as if it was nothing. The left and right halves collapsed to either side. His pink entrails slopped out, sending a sour stench into the air. Krrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr end of its slash. It was a purr of delight. That much could be read from his face, even if it was hard to look at because it was rotting. The Death Knight was enjoying this. He had unquestionable authority. He was a killer. He enjoyed the feeble resistance the humans put up, their fear, their despair. They all held swords, but no one moved to attack. At first, they had, despite their fear, but even if they were lucky enough to slip past his defense, they couldn't put so much as a nick in his armor. In response, the Death Knight didn't even bother with his sword. He just knocked them flying with his shield, hitting them hard, but not so hard they'd die. His aim in holding back was to play. It was clear he relished the pathetic human's frantic struggle. He only swung his sword like he meant it when someone tried to run away. The first who had tried to run was Lilac. He was a good-natured fellow, if an obnoxious drunk. In a flash, all 4 of his limbs had been severed. As a finishing touch, his head was lopped off. Seeing one of their own die was enough for the others to learn they couldn't run. Attacking was futile. They'd be killed if they ran. In that case, there was only one thing to do: die as this monster's plaything. Everyone was wearing close helmets, so it was impossible to tell, but they all must have realized their fate. Some were sniffling. Grown men were crying like children. They'd been strong. They had robbed the weak of their lives. They'd gotten used to it. They weren't prepared to face the reverse. God help us, some murmured between their sobs. Oh God, if Lons wasn't careful, he felt like he'd soon be on his knees. He would either be praying or blaspheming. You bastards, get that monster under control. A voice that grated on the ears like an out-of-tune hymn rang out among the supplicating knights. It had come from a knight right next to the Death Knight. Trying to tiptoe away from his comrade who'd been cut in half, he just looked ridiculous. Lons frowned at the ungainly figure. The close helmet hid the face, and the voice was strained due to fear, so it was hard to tell who it was. But there was only one guy who took that tone. Commander Belias. Lons grimaced. He'd been chasing village girls out of vulgar desire, then cried for help after getting into a fight with their father. When someone got them apart, he'd taken his rage out on the father by stabbing him over and over. That's the kind of guy he was. Back home, he was a man of some means and only joined the company because he thought it would look good. They'd probably been doomed from the moment he was selected as commander. I'm too important to die here. Buy me some time. Be my shields. Of course, no one moved. He was commander, but no one cared for him very much, so there was no way they would risk their lives for him. The only one who reacted to the shout was the Death Knight. He slowly turned in Belias's direction. Yeek. I'm impressed he could even get words out, much less get his voice to carry, standing that close to the Death Knight. Lons was oddly impressed. Belias's terrified voice thundered on. Money, I'll pay you, 200 gold pieces, no 500. He was offering quite a sum, but he might as well have been telling them he'd pay them if they survived jumping off a 500-foot cliff. No one moved a muscle, but there was one response. Well, half of someone moved. Ogabo, the right side of the knight, who had been split in two, grabbed Belias's right ankle. He spluttered blood as he spoke in words that wouldn't form. Ajah, Belias screeched. All the knights and villagers who were within view of the situation froze solid. A squire zombie. In Yggdrasil, when a Death Knight killed something, an undead with the same level as the defeated opponent would spawn. The game had a system such that anything that died by the sword of a Death Knight would be loyal to it for all eternity. Belias's screech cut off abruptly. He collapsed onto his back, as if something inside him had snapped. He must have passed out. The Death Knight approached the now defenseless commander and stabbed him with the flambage. Belias's body spasmed. Agkai jerked awake by the pain. He screamed in a way that made everyone wish they could plug their ears. Shave me, please shave me. I'm so terrifying. He'd frantically grabbed hold of the flambage sticking out of him, but the Death Knight ignored that and began soaring up and down. A chunk of his flesh, plate armor and all, was cut off. A heavy splatter of blood flew through the air. "Jayak, Jayak, I'll pay you. Okay, shave me." His body spasmed violently several times and then went limp. The Death Knight, satisfied, moved away from the meaty wreckage. "No, no, no, oh God." Several of the other knights, driven nearly insane, began to scream. The moment they ran, they'd be killed. But to stay put was a fate worse than death. They knew both those things, so they were helplessly paralyzed. "Pull yourselves together," Lons roared, cutting their shrieking short. It was so silent it felt like time had stopped. "We are retreating. Signal the horses and mounted archers. Everyone else, buy us time until the whistle is blown. We're not going to die like that. Now go." Everyone sprang into action at once. They moved in such perfect coordination, it was like the paralysis of the previous moment had been a lie. They acted with the force of a waterfall. By following their orders like machines, they ceased thinking, and they could perform miraculous feats. They would probably never achieve such exquisite order ever again. The knights confirmed with one another what each of them would do. There was one knight with one of the whistles they used to communicate. They had to protect him. He backed away a few steps. He cast away his sword and went into his haversack for the whistle. Yarug, as if in response, the Death Knight charged. He was heading straight for the key knight. Was he aiming to destroy their means of escape and plunge them further into despair? Everyone was chilled to the bone. The raven-black flood surged closer. It was clear to everyone that whoever stood in its path would be killed, but they formed a breakwater anyway. They replaced their fear with an even more terrible fear, fueling themselves to act. The shield was brandished and a knight went flying. The sword flashed and a knight's upper and lower body were severed. "Dazen, Moret, take your swords and cut off the heads of those who have been killed quickly, or they'll come back as monsters." The men who were named hastily ran toward the dead knights. The shield was brandished again, and one was bashed and sent flying. The other attempted to block the flambage coming down on him and was cut, sword and all, in half. In the space of a few breaths, 4 of Lons's comrades had lost their lives. Shuddering, he watched as the storm of raven-black bore down on him. He cried out, a true martyr. Though he had no chance of winning, he wouldn't go down without a fight. He screamed a battle cry and swung his sword as hard as he could at the oncoming Death Knight. Perhaps the extreme situation had pulled out all the stops in Lons's body. Even he was astonished by what a powerful attack he'd unleashed. It was the best swing of his life. The Death Knight countered with his flambage. One swing sent Lons's vision spinning. Below, he saw his headless body crumple to the ground. His sword sliced the air, making not so much as a scratch. At the same time, a horn resounded through the area. At the sound of the horn, Momonga Aints looked up. Around him were scattered the corpses of the knights who had been on watch. Enveloped in the thick stench of blood, Aints had been performing experiment after experiment, but wasn't prioritizing the right things. He cast away the knight's sword he held. The beautifully polished blade was dirtied when it fell to the earth, and I used to always be so jealous of people with abilities like reduce physical damage. Lord Aints Ul Gaun. Aints is fine, albedo. His simple reply seemed to confuse her. Oh Teehee, is it really all right to be so rude as to abbreviate the name of our supreme ruler? Aints didn't think it was such a big deal. It did make him happy, however, to hear that she held the name of Aints Ul Gaun so sacred. His tone naturally softened. I don't mind, albedo. Until my old friends show up, this name is my name, so I allow it. Understood, but I will still attach the title. Ahem, my master, Lord Aints Teehee. By the way, she squirmed a bit, perhaps out of shyness, but since she was covered head to toe in full plate armor, none of her beauty shone through. The sight was so strange it was a bit awkward. Could it be that, Teehee, you're letting me specially call you by this shortened? No. Being called such a long name every time would be annoying. I'm going to have everyone call me the same thing. Oh, of course. I assumed her mood suddenly darkened. Next, Aints asked her a question with a bit of anxiety. Albedo, do you find anything wrong with me calling myself by this name? I think it fits you extremely well. I think it's appropriate for the man I love, ahem, for the one who kept the supreme beings together. Originally, it was a name that stood for all 41 of us, including your creator, Tabula Smaragdina. So how does it strike you that I leave all your masters out of this and take the name as my own? I realize this may invite your displeasure, but I will be so bold as to humbly offer one thought. If it causes you to furrow your brow in the slightest, please order me to kill myself if one of those who abandoned us were to leave you, Lord Momonga. who stayed with us all this time, out of it, and take the name. I may have felt it was wrong. But if it is you, my lord, and all the others' whereabouts are unknown, what else could I feel but happiness? Albedo bowed her head quickly. Ain't said nothing. Nothing registered after the word abandoned. All his former guildmates had left for a reason. After all, Yggdrasil was a game, not something one could sacrifice reality for. That went for Momonga too. But did he harbor some suppressed rage toward his guildmates for abandoning him? HRM, maybe, maybe not. Human emotions move in mysterious, complicated ways. There's no answer. Albedo, lift your head. I've understood your thoughts. Yes, this is my name. Until some of my friends come to raise objections, it will refer to me only. Understood, sublime lord and master. Nothing makes me happier than that the man I love should call himself by that sacred name. Love her, despite his dark thoughts, Aints chose to avoid the issue for the moment. I thank you. Oh, but Lord Aints. Are you sure it's all right for me to be wasting your time like this? Of course, I am satisfied simply standing at your side, but well, yes, a stroll might be nice. He had come to save the village. He already knew the girls' parents were dead. Remembering their corpses, he clawed at his face. When he'd seen their dead bodies, it was as if he'd seen two bugs lying dead in the road. He felt no pity, no sadness, no anger, nothing. Well, let's put aside the idea of a stroll, but it's true that we're not in any particular hurry. It seems the Death Knight is doing his job. I'd expect nothing less of an undead you created, Lord Aints. I marvel at his magnificent efficacy. The undead made with Aints' powerful magic and skills was stronger than normal undead. Still, this one was only about level 35. Compared to the Overlord Weissman and Grim Reaper Thanatos's, he could make using experience points. The Death Knight wasn't so fancy. If such a weak monster was still fighting, it meant none of the enemies in the area were terribly strong. In other words, they weren't in any danger. Realizing this, he wanted to pull a victory pose, but he suppressed the urge, knowing he had to act his part. He did, however, do a mini fist pump under his robe. It probably just happens that the knights who attacked this village are weak, he thought. Anyhow, let's go check on the survivors. Aints was about to leave when he realized there were some things he needed to do first. For starters, he turned off the staff of Aints Ulgaun's effects. The evil aura it had been giving off flickered and went out like a flame blown in the wind. Next, he went into his item box and took out a mask that would cover his whole face. A difficult-to-pin-down expression was carved into it, tears or perhaps anger. It was a bit ornate. If someone had told him it looked like the masks of Barong or Rangda from Bali, he would have agreed. Despite how weird it looked, it didn't have any powers. It was an event item, and it wasn't possible to augment it. The only way to obtain it was to have been in-game for 2 hours or more during the period between 7 and 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Or rather, if one was there and therefore dateless on the most romantic day of the year, it was forcibly added to the player's inventory. It was a type of cursed item. In that sense, it was considered a cursed item. Its name was Mask of the Jealous or the Jealousy Mask. Are the admins on crack? We've been waiting for this. There are some people in my guild who don't have it, but we can PK for it, right? Screw being human. That was the kind of stuff written in the Yggdrasil thread on a major forum site about the mask Aints now donned. Then, he took out some gauntlets. They were typical, unsophisticated iron gauntlets. One could get them anywhere. They had no outstanding features. They were known as J.R. Engraper. The guild had made them for fun. Their only effect was to boost the wearer's strength. He equipped them. With that, all of his skeletal exterior was covered. Naturally, there was a reason he was taking pains to conceal himself. He finally realized the fatal error he'd been making. Aints was used to his bony body from Yggdrasil. There was nothing horrific about it to him, but it seemed to strike fear into the hearts of the people who lived in this world. That must be true. Not only little girls thought he was there to take their lives, even the armed knights had been frightened. In any case, by changing his equipment, he succeeded in downgrading his impression from evil monster to evil caster hopefully. He wondered what to do about his staff, but decided to take it. It wouldn't get in the way. If you were going to pray to your god to save you, maybe you shouldn't have been massacring people. Ain't spat a line only an unbeliever could spit in the direction of a knight who died with his fingers knit together in prayer. Then he cast a spell. Fly. He glided lightly into the air, and Albedo followed him a moment later. Death Knight, if there are any knights left alive, leave them. We can use them. In response to Aintz's thought came compliance. He understood what the Death Knight was feeling and what kind of situation he was in, even at a distance. It was a vague sensation, difficult to describe. He flew quickly in the direction the horn had sounded. The wind whipped at him. He hadn't been able to go this fast in Yggdrasil. His robe got twisted around his body in an irksome way, but the flight was brief. Soon he was above the village. He looked down.